All right, welcome back to part 3. If you're liking this, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. I got a couple more of these in me. Let me know what you think about it. I think we're gonna build a front end today, and everyone says React mostly. A bunch of people said Vue as well. I don't really know anything about Vue or that much about Vue right now. It maybe would be fun to rebuild it once I have the interface and see just for a learning experience, but most of the requests are coming in at React. So I'm going to use that. I like to use a framework called Next.js, which does all of the tooling, server-side rendering for you under the hood. And there's no like Webpack config or anything. There is, but it's just not exposed to you. And it's great. So I went ahead and moved everything we've done so far into the backend folder. I'm going to make a new folder called Frontend. And let's go into our front end here. And we're going to npm install React DOM. Next, this is everything that I did in my last project. So I like that. So React DOM, next, and date functions. Date function is just a little library, kind of like moment.js that allows us to display things like 2 minutes ago or 6 days ago or 6 months ago. You sort of get the point. So I can open up my front end here. I forgot to npm init, so shoot. So I'm gonna npm init, and I realize I can pass -y there too, and then npm install all those things again, and that should add them to our package.json. Then I'm going to go into my scripts. Actually, let's scaffold this out a little bit more. We need a components, and we need a pages directory. Good. Let's go in here. And in our pages directory, give ourselves an index.js. And just say const home is equal to, let's just do a regular function. Home, return, paragraph, hey, export default function home. And then we need some scripts. So our dev is going to be next dev. And our start, when we go into production, is going to be just next. And I think we also need a build. Okay, and then I think if we run npm run dev, it should start up a local server that shows us hey. Beautiful. So that's our React app up and running. Some other things. I'm going to keep it super simple, not worry about styling or anything like that, just or like pages or anything like that. Let's just start with getting the components sort of scaffolded out. Let's start off with, I'm going to use context for storing all of my data at a higher level. So we'll call that scrape context.js. And we'll say const scrape context is equal to react.create context. Import React from React. And I know I have a video on this. I've used it 100 times. I'm just going to pull up the docs for it. Default value of create context is nothing. And then we will const provider is equal to scrape context.provider. Is that what it is? Capital P, good. And the consumer, maybe we'll call that scrape provider and scrape consumer. And that is the consumer. Actually, we don't even need that consumer because we can use hooks for that. So we'll export that. And I think we are good. Let's make another component called capital P page. I'll just make it look like this. Function page. And export default function page. And from there, we'll return a div. Give it a class. Name of page. And we'll destructure the props.children. And the other thing we need inside of there is a provider. So import the provider, the scrape provider from scrape context. We'll take that scrape provider and we'll put it into here. There we go. And then every time that we need to inject this provider, we simply just wrap our pages in a page component. We could also do this in a custom underscore document or a custom underscore app. I did that in my own course, but in this case, I'm just going to import the page from the components directory. And I'm simply just going to wrap every single page that I have in a page component. And hey, oh, cool. So is this still working? Looks like it. Let's open it up in our dev tools. We got our provider here. Good. Another thing we need is the value of that. Hey, oh, let's go. There we go. There's our data. Now let's see if we can get that context working at a little lower level. So let's just make a new component that's going to display our actual scrapes. So we'll call that scrapes. Maybe we'll call that data.js. And export function data. Export default function data. And inside of that, we want to return a div. This is h2, your data. And then inside of that, we want to display that data and we want to grab that from context. So we'll import use context from React. And we'll say const scrape data is equal to use context. And we also need to import the context. We export it from this file. It's called scrape context. And then we pass that scrape context. And let's just console.log the scrape data. See if that's working. URL property is deprecated. What did I do? I didn't use URL. Oh, in some cases, React DevTools may trigger this. Temporarily disable the... Okay, so that's not actually an issue that we have. It's not showing up because I didn't use this component anywhere. Let's import it into our homepage. From components, data. And let's just go ahead and homepage and use the data component. Hey, ho, there we go. So that's kind of cool. I know that was maybe a little bit quick, but so what I did is that I created this like scrape context and Context allows us to put our data up a little higher and then consume it at a lower level. So we inject our provider at the highest level of our application, and then anywhere lower, in our case, we're doing it at our like one level deeper here, we have our data component, and then our data component can simply just pull that data out of the air, so to speak, with this use context hook, and then we can access it by saying things like scrape data dot hey, and that should show me, oh yeah, exactly. So I have my data, and why would I do that? Because I want to keep all of my scrape data at a high level in my application. That way, if I need it at anywhere lower level, I totally can access that. Next up, I think we need to take a quick break from the front end and make an endpoint on our back end. So just close these all down. Sometimes I like to open my back end and my front end in separate ones once it starts to get big. Let's open up the back end index.js here. And let's just get another endpoint. So app.get, call it data. And we're going to have a sync request response next. And what we need to do here is get the scrape data and to respond with JSON. So what we need is the database. And what was that database called that we, db.js? LowDB. Let's look at the docs for LowDB again. So db.get posts. I think that's that all I need. .write. .value. db.get posts find where the ID is 1. .value. For performance, use .value instead of .write if you're only reading from the database. Okay. You can use any of the powerful Lodash functions like get, find. Oh, that's why it's called LowDB, because you can use all the Lodash API against the database, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's just db.get Twitter .value const tweet Twitter, and then res.json Twitter. Is the backend running? No, npm run dev. Running. One thing that's bugging me about this is that it doesn't say localhost. All right, now it's clickable. And we can go to /data, and beautiful. So what we're doing here is we're reading all of the scrapes that I have. I left it on for a minute, so there's a bunch of them in here. But it's reading all of the Twitter ones. I wonder if I could just like send multiple pieces of data. Let's look at LowDB here. What if I just call db.value instead of get? Oh, it gives me everything. I wonder if you can just get multiple. Nah, I'm sure there's something. Let's just use db.value. We will probably have to modify this at some point so that it doesn't just pull absolutely everything. Like maybe we want to like have filter buttons for the last hour, last day, last month, and you can sort of see it at that granular level. In our case, we're just going to grab everything and send it right now. But we should switch it out at some point just because this data is going to get too large for us to send that over the wire all in one dump. Okay. That's good. So we're going to try hit this endpoint on our front end now. So we're going to close up the back end here, open up our front end, go to our page.js. Now we need to make a custom hook that will internally have state and like a side effect that's going to fetch data. The fetching data story right now in React is kind of weird because like we're waiting for this thing that's called suspense, which is going to make data fetching pretty opinionated. But right now we don't have suspense, but we do have hooks. So I'm going to try my best to do data fetching hooks that we have here. So I'm going to say, what do we need? Import use effect, use state. Those are the two that we need from React. And then we'll make a function called use scrapes. It's our custom hook. And then we'll say const scrapes set scrapes is equal to use state. We'll set that to an object because I want it to just be like this object right here. And then we will return the scrapes, I think. Then in here, we're just going to call use effect. And when the thing loads, we are going to give it an empty array for now. Console log mounting or updating. And if that is true, then we are going to make this an async function. We will fetch from this localhost. I think this is where we'll probably run into CORS issues. Const response is equal to await. Const data is equal to response.json. Await. And then let's just console log the data and call set scrapes with the data. Okay. So we have some internal state. We have an effect that will run on mount or update, which will fetch our data from our endpoint and then store it in our state, which we can then go into here and say const scrapes scrapes is equal to use scrapes. And then we can just actually pass the scrapes down to our value here. Then, and we might take this out. I don't know if this necessarily belongs in the page component. We can move that later if we decide that it doesn't work there. I just like to get things working and then refactor later so that it works. What is it complaining about children? Oh, prop types. Okay. Now does our app? Here we go. An effect function must not return anything besides a function which is used for cleanup. It looks like you wrote a use effect. This is what I ran into before. Okay. So a use effect, if you return something from use effect, that's a cleanup function. And that's going to happen when component did unmount. But if you have an async function inside of use effect, then by default, an async function just returns a promise that resolves when the data gets returned from it. So it's getting mad at me here for how we can do that. So what we can do here, this is not the nicest thing ever, but you can, I don't know, Twitter, West Boss, use effect. I fixed this. I forget how I did it. about data fetching with hooks? I just did like an anonymous function in here. Yeah. Bunk. This is not a good thing to do with your life, but let's do it anyway. So we passed in an anonymous and an iffy, immediately invoked anonymous function. And then that gets around this weird thing where we can't return a promise from it. That will be fixed. You see, like, everybody else has this problem as well. So it's not just me that has a bad coder. Now what is it? Okay. First question: access to fetch was not allowed, and that was because we have CORS issues. So let's go to our backend index.js real quick, and I'm gonna look at how I did it. GitHub, Westboss, Sniper. I think I need to install the CORS backend index CORS. npm install CORS. We will import CORS and app.use CORS and start it again. Let's close down some of these. Okay. Okay, first one, fetch API cannot load a webpack. Must be HTTP. Oh, I probably goofed that up. No. What did I?
2,000 years later.
Okay, I got to figure it out. Use effect required a function. I was just passing an iffy, which was not returning a function. So we had to pass an anonymous function, which in turn has an immediately invoked and asynchronous anonymous function that calls itself. This is a bit of a mess. I think this will all change when Suspense comes out, but that's the way we got to do it for now. You can see now that we're console logging this data, we have both pieces of our data being pulled in. That's great. And then I can call the set scrapes API here. And I believe now we can go into our data.js and simply say like scrape data dot Twitter dot length. And oh, we got an error. I think I forgot to put, I forgot to pass the scrapes back when I was debugging that last one. Cannot property length of undefined. That's because our default scrapes have to be Twitter as an empty array and Instagram as an empty array. Cannot get property scrape. Why not? Let's take a quick look at our data.js. Let's get rid of this. Up here, console log scrape data. So here we go. So what happens is immediately we get our scrapes, which is nothing. And then we get our scrapes, which has our data in. It re-renders once the data comes back. Those both should have a... Oh, I see. We're one level deeper. Let's destructure these scrapes. And then down here, we can say scrapes.twitter.length. 49. There we go. And I think we should be able to just have an unordered list where we take our Twitter scrapes dot map scrape, and for each one we'll return the scrape dot count. Yeah, that's gonna whine at us for not having a key, so we'll say scrape dot date. Go. And then date fn's time ago. Distance in words is what we want. So if we want to say how long ago that has been, say dash import in words from date functions. And then down here, we can say distance in words. That requires two things. The scrape, the first date, so new date, which is, we want to pass it our scrape.date. And then the second argument is going to just be now. So new date. About 6 hours ago. There we go. Less than a minute ago, it was scraped. One kind of funny thing you'll notice about these values is that they do go up and down. So you'll see that it's 86, 86, 87, 93, 87, 87, 93. I think that's because either load balancing in Twitter, or it's hitting different load balancers and that it's been cached. Or also Reddit does this as well with the amount of comments, is they don't show you the exact amount to try to deter bots, to see like if a bot would like see how many followers you have and then hit the follow button and then check it again and it would be one more, then they know that their thing is working. So it's just like one little thing that these people do to sort of throw them off the scent. Good. So that's showing up. I can do that with the Instagram as well. I think that's enough for today. We've got the sort of the fundamentals of it down pat, of fetching data, putting it in our provider, and then surfacing it later. It's a little bit cowboyed in right here. We're just kind of grabbing the data and displaying it. But maybe in the next one, let me know what you want to see. Maybe we'll spend some time putting some graphs in, or maybe working with some style components. Maybe that would look good. Maybe some sort of routing. You let me know what you want to see, and we'll pick it up from there.